like many. I love to look at the stars. I love the fact that ours is just one among many. What I love about astronomy is that our constellations tell a story. Our constellations were born from mythology. Mythology was our first attempt to understand the world in which we live. We put a god in everything, and those gods would give us our reasons. Why is the sky blue? Who chose blue? The gods. How come men have nipples? It's the will of the gods. Why does this wine taste so good? There's a god in it. And for a while there was not a single thing that the gods could not explain. We believed that their anger gave us lightning, their despair gave us rain. We whispered our desires to them, believing that their charity would sustain us. But those gods were just stories. But stories became a large part of how we learn. They burn lessons into our memories. They become a part of how we remember, and we can remember almost everything, right down to that first unbearable bee sting, when we learn that this tiny blue marble we call the world has rule.
We communicate who we are through clothing. It is fundamentally a part of what we wish to communicate about ourselves.
We used to have a system, a fashion system. That has absolutely nothing to do with the fashion industry today. It has been reinvented.
It's based on materialism. The problem is that comes at a really high price.
Garment factory collapsed, killing more than 1,000.
Clashes between clothes factory workers and riot police in Cambodia.
Last November, 112 people were killed in another major factory fire. 30,000 Chinese workers have been on strike.
Garment workers in Bangladesh paying the price for cheap clothing.
Well, the promise of globalization was that it was going to be a win-win, that consumers in the rich world would get cheaper goods and people in the poorer parts of the world would get jobs, and that those jobs would give them an opportunity to work their way out of poverty.
This enormous, rapacious industry that is generating so much profit, why is it that it is unable to support millions of its workers properly?
The actual business model is completely unsustainable. Unless you change that model, you can't change anything.
When everything is concentrated on making profits, what you see is that human rights, the environment, workers' rights get lost.
My God, we can do better than this.
There is absolutely no evidence to support the statement that we're the greatest country in the world. We're 7th in literacy, 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, 3rd in median household income, number 4 in labor force, and number 4 in exports. We lead the world in only 3 categories: number of incarcerated citizens per capita, number of adults who believe angels are real, and defense spending, where we spend more than the next 26 countries combined, 25 of whom are allies. Now, none of this is the fault of a 20-year-old college student, but you nonetheless are, without a doubt, a member of the worst generation ever. So when you ask what makes us the greatest country in the world, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Yosemite?
We're all exposed to so many things without our knowledge and end up with some type of health consequences like infertility or like cancer or like a learning disability. And we're like, oh, why do I have this?
You can't explain it by just genetics, right? Genetic drift does not happen in 20 years. So there has to be some type of other factor that's going on that explains this. And chemicals are certainly one thing that's gone up dramatically in the last 50 years.
You can go through a few classic examples of major mistakes in which we allow these industries to get away with murder.
We're just observers, these two little dots on the side of the mountain. And we watched and recorded the largest witness calving event ever caught on tape.
So how big was this calving event that we just looked at? We'll resort to some illustrations again to give you a sense of scale. It's as if the entire lower tip of Manhattan broke off, except that the thickness, the height of it, is equivalent to buildings that are 2.5 or 3 times higher than they are. That's a magical, miraculous, horrible, scary thing. I don't know that anybody's really seen the miracle and horror of that. It took 100 years for it to retreat 8 miles from 1900 to 2000. From 2000 to 2010, it retreated 9 miles. So in 10 years, it retreated more than it had in the previous 100.
I wanted to find a way to be more in the moment, to be more in every day, to understand time more, to understand my own life more, to have more memories, all of these things, basically to live more richly as a human life, not just as a work life. And so I designed this project to take a picture every day, and I thought it would make me more aware of life as it was passing. It was like it gave me this enhanced awareness for life. I always think there's going to be such a clear endpoint with things, with life. Not always an endpoint, but a clear signal of like, okay, yes, this is clearly the thing to be doing now, no doubt about it. But it's so rare that I ever feel that certainty. Much more often, I'm just aimlessly wandering from one thing to the next. You just never really know. It just feels so random sometimes, everything. I use stories as a technique to organize the past, and I think there's a real lack of storytelling now among all of us. Like, we're all living lives that are so fragmented and so moment to moment. What's happening now? What's the latest text message? What's the latest news blurb? It's all so moment that there's not that time to create stories, to make sense of your experience. I think that's one big thing I learned doing this project, is that you really need privacy. I think you need space in order to contemplate and grow. I feel like I've definitely grown probably more in this last year than I've grown in any other year in my life, and I think it's largely because of doing this project. I think it was an incredible instrument for personal growth, among many other things. But that said, I'm not sure exactly what I've grown into. Boy meets world, boy still baffled. Something like that.